The morning my sister smashed 40 jars of my honey against the front gate, I was already reaching for my ledger. Not my phone. Not her. My ledger. Because I'd learned by then that the numbers never lied to me, even when everyone standing in that yard had spent their whole lives lying to each other. My name's Marlo Hale. I'm 27. 4 years ago I owned $200, a bicycle, and 11 wooden boxes full of bees. Nobody in my family thought I'd keep alive past March. What happened at my grandmother's 85th birthday, in an orchard I built from nothing, is the reason half my family hasn't spoken to the other half since. And I want to tell you the whole thing, calmly, from the beginning, because I think some of you already know exactly which sibling you were, in your own house. If you've ever been the one who was so easy, so low maintenance, we never had to worry about you, stay. This one's for you. And when we get to what my sister said into that microphone she didn't know was still recording, you'll want to have already hit subscribe. Here's the shape of my childhood in one sentence. My sister Talia broke, and I built. Every single time. I was 9 the first time I understood the trade. My school play was the same night as one of Talia's spells. That's what my mother called them, spells, like weather. I had 4 lines. I said them to an audience of 1 empty folding chair, reserved for parents who never came. In the car home, my mother didn't apologize. She explained, "Your sister needed us tonight, Marlo. You're so steady. That's your gift." I collected that word, steady, the way other kids collected scars. By 14 I understood it wasn't a compliment. It was a job description. Steady meant, whatever breaks in this house, it will not be fixed with attention paid to you. My father saw it. He never said much, but once, when I was 16, weeding my grandmother Opal's bee yard with her on a Sunday, he crouched next to me and said, low, like a secret, "Your turn is coming, Mar. I mean it." I believed him completely. That was the most expensive sentence anyone ever said to me, and it took 3 years to collect on it. 3 weeks before my 20th birthday, Talia announced a wellness retreat in Sedona. Very selective, very transformative, needed a $4,000 deposit by Friday, or her spot went to someone whose family actually supported her healing. I remember the exact temperature the kitchen went to when she said it. Cold. In that specific way our house went cold whenever money was about to move. 4 days later, my mother sat on the edge of my bed with 2 mugs of tea and her gentlest voice, the one she saved for taking things back. "Sweetheart, about your party. With everything Talia's going through right now, it would just feel like rubbing salt in it if we celebrated you. Not if we cancelled. If we celebrated you, like celebrating was the offense." I asked when exactly my turn was scheduled. She looked at me the way you'd look at a child asking a question above her age, and said the sentence I built the rest of my life on top of. "Don't be dramatic, Marlo. You've never needed this stuff the way she does." That night the bakery called to confirm changes to my order. I hadn't made any changes. They read them to me anyway. Same cake, new name in the icing. "Welcome home, Talia." My 21st birthday had been harvested for parts before it even happened, and nobody had told me I was the donor. Here's the part I didn't expect. I didn't cry. Something in me went very quiet, the way a room goes quiet right before a storm actually arrives instead of just threatening to. I packed 1 bag. I biked 2 miles in the dark to the only person who had ever paid me fairly for anything, my grandmother's old beekeeping partner, a man named Frank Doyle, 71, built like a fence post, allergic to flattery. I knocked on his door at 11 at night, and he looked at my bag for exactly 1 second before he said, "There's a cot in the honey house. Rent's $40 a month. You'll earn it before the bees wake up. I want you to sit with that for a second, because it matters for what's coming." I left with $200 and no plan. What I didn't leave with, what I thought I still had, was my own money, and I was about to find out I didn't. 3 days after I moved out, on my actual birthday, I went to close my savings account so I could open one with my own name only on it. The teller's face did that thing bank teller faces do when the screen disagrees with the customer standing in front of them. Balance, $612. $4,000 had been withdrawn 3 weeks earlier, right when Talia's very selective retreat needed its deposit right away. I called my mother from the parking lot. She didn't even pause. "Family money goes where the family needs it, Marlo. You're strong. You'll earn it back." Then, softer, like she was doing me a favor. This is what families do for each other. Here's what she didn't know yet. That phone call was the last thing she'd get to control the story around, because 2 months later, a reporter would call me, and I would say yes. But first, Winter. I want to be honest about Winter, because nobody puts this part in the highlight reel. I worked Frank's hives in the freezing dark, learned to read a queen's temperament by the sound of a box, wrote everything down in a ledger by lamplight, because Frank said memory lies but ink doesn't. I deferred my spot in a state apiculture program because I couldn't afford both rent and tuition, and some part of me was terrified that deferring meant disappearing. Meanwhile, back at my parents' house, my $4,000 had bought Talia 11 days in Sedona before she came home early, and a version of the story where I was the one who'd stormed off over a party. That version played at church. It played at my aunt's dinner table. Nobody there had seen the bank statement. I had. Spring is when I almost lost everything a second time. I split my first 2 hives too early, gambling on a warm forecast, and a hard frost came down out of nowhere on a still, clear night, the kind that doesn't announce itself. I lost half a colony in one morning. I sat on an overturned bucket and let myself feel sick about it for exactly 1 hour, because Frank had taught me that self-pity doesn't make honey, but a written record does. I wrote down the date, the temperature, the mistake. Then I rebuilt. By June I had jars. By July I had a folding table at the Millbrook Farmers Market between a woman selling goat cheese and a man selling kindling, and a hand-lettered sign that said, "Wildflower honey, $12. My first Saturday, I sold out by 11 a.m. and made $210 in a cigar box. It was less than 1 week of the diner shifts I was still working on the side, but every dollar in that box had come out of a box I owned outright, and money like that weighs different in your hand. Word travels in small towns exactly the way you'd think. 2 women from my mother's own book club stopped at my table, recognized me, and suddenly got very interested in the beeswax candles. By the time the market closed, my phone had 1 new message from a number I hadn't heard from in months. "Cute little table. Proud of you." I read it twice and went back to counting jars. I never answered it. By September, I had a real name for the operation, Hale Apiary, painted on an old fence board by my best friend Priya, who did it without asking me first, because she said if she waited for my permission, I'd talk her out of it. I still hid at the back of my own table, while Priya did the talking. Old habits don't die, they just change uniforms. Then, the second week of October, my phone rang with a number from the county paper. A reporter named Renata Cole wanted to profile the 20-year-old beekeeper rebuilding a family apiary from scratch. My first instinct, trained into me since I was 9, was to say no, hand the spotlight down the table to someone louder. Frank stopped me before I could call her back. "Girl, your family's been telling your story at every dinner table in this county for a year. You keep hiding, they keep writing the ending. Take the pen back." I called Renata back the next morning. The article ran 2 weeks later, front page of the features section, no mention of my parents at all, which somehow said more than if she'd printed every ugly detail. By that afternoon my mother had read it. By that evening, so had everyone she'd ever told her version to. And that's when my grandmother Opal called with a demand nobody was allowed to say no to. She was turning 85, and she announced, to the entire family, all at once, so nobody could quietly talk her out of it, that her birthday would be held at my apiary. Not the church hall my aunt wanted. Not my parents' house, where my mother could manage things. My orchard, my hives, everyone invited, including 2 parents and 1 sister I hadn't stood in the same room with in a year. "She'll never come," I told my grandmother. "She'll come," Opal said, flat as a kitchen table. Because skipping it in front of everyone would cost her more than showing up will. That's exactly why I picked it there. Before I tell you what happened in that orchard, I want to know something honestly, down in the comments. If your family had done this to you, would you have let them come? Because I almost said no. I sat with that question for 3 days, and if this story is starting to sound like your story, hit subscribe now, because what happens next is the part nobody in my family will repeat the same way twice. 1 week before the party, my mother called with what she framed as a small favor. How many chairs, whether Aunt Ruth should bring her lemon bars, and then, Like slipping a blade into a picnic basket. One little thing, sweetheart. When people ask about the apiary, and they will, it would mean so much if you framed it as a family project. You did learn this from your grandmother's side, after all. I laughed, one short, involuntary syllable. She pressed on, voice sweetening exactly the way it did whenever the real ask was still coming. And Dr. Ferris thinks it would be healing for Talia to have a role there. Nothing formal. Just, if it comes up, you could mention she's handling events for Hale Apiary now. She needs a win, Marlowe. You have so many. There it was, the billing department, open for business, scaling right along with my harvest. No, Mum, I said, calm as I could manage. This isn't an apology, and it isn't a job posting. You're welcome Sunday as guests. That's the whole invitation. She went quiet, exactly one beat too long, said fine too lightly, and hung up first. I thought I'd closed the door. I had only closed the one I could see. The party fell on a bright, cold Sunday in late September, almost exactly 1 year since I'd biked away in the dark with one bag. Priya and Frank strung lights through the orchard trees. We set 200 jars of honey down the long tables in amber rows that caught the afternoon sun like something lit from inside. My grandmother arrived like visiting royalty, took one slow lap past the hives on my father's arm, and installed herself at the head table, where she could watch both the cake and the truth arrive at the same time. My mother stepped out of her car in a cream dress, and, I'll give her this, she never once looked surprised. She toured the tables complimenting the jars, telling my aunt, "Oh, we always knew Marlowe had the gift. She gets it from my side. I kept bees myself as a girl." 1 year of she stormed off over nothing, repaved in a single afternoon into we always believed in her. Talia came last, 40 minutes late, in a dress too formal for folding chairs, filming the whole arrival on her phone. She'd told my mother she wanted content for the family page. She drifted the perimeter with the camera up, narrating for nobody in particular, and I noticed, but I didn't think much of it. That was my mistake. I should have thought much more of it. Just before the toasts, I found my mother alone at the far end of the orchard, touching a hive box the way you'd touch something you suspected might still sting you. "We had bees when I was a girl," she said. "Not really to me. I let the flat of seedlings dry out the year your grandmother got sick. Everybody was too busy telling my brother how strong he'd have to be. Nobody watered mine. For one breath, I saw a whole other girl standing inside her, one who'd been fed the exact same lie I had, 30 years earlier. Then her spine straightened, and the light went out of her face like a switch in a farmhouse window. "That's what love is," she said briskly. "The strong ones carry it." And she walked back toward the tables. Then my grandmother stood, glass raised, and named the whole thing out loud. 85 years, and this is the first birthday I've ever had in the middle of something honest. She looked straight at me. "This orchard is the most honest thing this family has grown in 30 years. That's the exact moment my mother rose from her chair, smiling, riding the applause like a woman catching a departing train. "And one more piece of happy news, everyone. Talia's going to be running events here at the apiary. Both our girls, building this together." The clapping started, uncertain, the way a crowd claps when something feels off, but nobody wants to be first to say so. I didn't raise my voice. "That's not true, Mom. And here's the twist nobody in that orchard saw coming, including me." Talia's phone was still up, still recording, propped against a jar for a steady shot of the toasts. She hadn't turned it off. She'd been live streaming the whole afternoon to a family group chat of 40 relatives who weren't even there, narrating it as content. Every word my mother said next went out live, in real time, to people watching from their own kitchens. Talia realized it half a second after everyone else did, when her phone buzzed with a flood of notifications mid-sentence. She looked down at the screen, then up at my mother, and her face did something I'd genuinely never seen it do before. Not a performance, just shock. "You told them I quit Sedona because I was unstable," Talia said, quiet at first, then not quiet at all. "You told Aunt Ruth I threw a fit. You never told anyone you took $4,000 out of her account to pay for it." She was crying now, but it didn't look practiced. It looked like something finally cracking that had been engineered not to. "I didn't even want the events job. You told me to say I did. On camera. For the family page." My mother's smile held its position for exactly one more second before it gave out entirely. Nobody moved. 40 relatives on a live stream, 30 in the orchard, and one long silence broken only by bees. My mother knelt in the grass to gather a fallen jar, kneading her hands to have a job while the rest of her caught up, and said low, just to me, like she thought the phone couldn't hear her anymore. "Fix this, Marlowe. Tell them it's a misunderstanding. Give your sister the job. This all goes back together, and you come home." I looked at her, and for one honest second I wanted it so badly I could taste it, the actual prize, held out at last, my mother asking me home. All I had to do was hand back the truth in exchange. "You're right that I've always been fine on my own," I said. "You made sure I got the practice. But I'm not buying my way back in with a lie. You're welcome here Sunday, as guests. That offer doesn't change price." She stood, still holding the jar, and for one second I thought, even then, I thought. Then she set it down like evidence, took Talia's hand, and walked out of my orchard without looking back. She's never come back to look. The party didn't end so much as exhale. My grandmother declared it the best birthday she'd had in 85 years and dared anyone to argue. My father stayed until the last car left, turning his cap over in his hands at the gate. "I should have said something years ago," he told the gravel, "not me. Turns out silence is the loudest thing I ever did." I told him I knew. I was done telling people it was okay. That winter, my father started sending me 4 lines a month in handwriting, like barbed wire. "Saw honey at the feed store. Thought of you. Ground froze early this year." I kept every one. Talia texted me once, past midnight, months later. "The orchard was beautiful. I'm sorry I filmed it. I'm not sorry you saw." I never answered. I never deleted it either. Some things you just leave in the folder and see how you feel by spring. The apiary is still a real business, which is the quiet miracle of any small business that survives its first hard frost. Last month, a 14-year-old named Delphine started coming around after school, all elbows and apology, trained by somebody to take up as little room as possible. I pay her real wages. I make her ask for a raise out loud, looking me in the eye, and the first time she managed it without flinching, I gave it to her on the spot. That's the harvest I'm proudest of, not the honey. The girl learning, years before I did, that she's allowed to charge for what she gives, and that anyone who only loves her invisible isn't family. They're just a landlord with her childhood photos on the wall. If you've ever been the steady one in a house that only paid attention to whoever was breaking, I hope you build something this year with your own name on it, in a place they can't talk over. Tell me down in the comments what you'd have said in that orchard, and if this one stayed with you, subscribe to Steady Hands Stories. Next week, another woman tells the whole truth, calmly, all the way to the end.